Hello, I'm David.
Hi, I'm Julie.
So now we're going to do a review of Star Wars, The Clone Wars by Z-Man Games. And this is using the pandemic system. And I don't see it on the box. Oh, here it is. It is 14 and up. You can play with younger. Mm-hmm. That's just done for regulation purposes. 1 to 5 players, so you can play solo. And it takes about 60 minutes. Well, if you've seen the How to Play and Playthrough, I played it solo. But really, you're playing 2 Jedis. And it's the same as a 2-player game. So let's take a look at how you play a little bit here. I'll go over it. If you want to see a more detailed how to play, check out the How to Play and Playthrough. So let's get started. Here's the board. You have planets, and so instead of cities and the map of the world, you have planets. This is the threat marker. This would be the outbreak track in pandemic. And here's the invasion marker, and this would be the epidemic track?
Something like that.
Yeah, where epidemics go.
Yeah.
In this version, though, we have 4 different villains you can play. And they recommend you play Asajj Ventress, but you can play with General Grievous, Count Dooku, and Darth Maul. Now, Julie has, even though I played it on camera solo, Julie and I have played it twice together. We played with Asajj Ventress and with Count Dooku. Mm-hmm. Each villain has their own villain AI deck, which governs their movements on the board. But every one, though, has a special card here called Planet Under Siege. So in the Clone Wars, as you may remember from the cartoon series and the movie, Attack of the Clones, the droids are trying to take over the Republic. And you have Space Federation ships that can cause blockades. But when this card comes up in the AI deck, that's when the invasion track moves up. Mm-hmm. Which means you're going to, infect, even though it's not called infect, you're going to invade more planets. So how do you win, though? Well, you got to defeat the villain, but before you do that, you got to complete so many missions. And there's a deck of missions here. It's for variety. And depending on what difficulty you want to play, we played Padawan, and you just got to complete 3 missions. But you can go Jedi Grandmaster and do 6 or more. So you got to complete so many missions. And you'll see there's tracks on the board here to keep track of this stuff, but to fit it on the camera, I wouldn't be able to do that. So the villain sheet would normally go up here, and the villain deck, and the discard villain cards. Here is where the invasion deck goes, where you flip up planets that will be invaded by droids. Here are the mission cards. You only reveal 2 at a time. So even though you're playing on Padawan, you're only going to know 2 of the missions out of the 3. And when you complete one, you reveal the 3rd one. Here is the squad deck. That's like the player deck in Pandemic, where instead of cities, it's different cards here you use to complete missions, to remove droids, and defeat the villain. So when this card comes up, like I said, in the villain deck, it will advance the invasion track. You'll take the discard pile, like in Pandemic, shuffle it, and put it on top. And you still take a card from the bottom to infect the planet with 3 droids. Now, when I say infect, I should say invade. So how would you set it up? Well, 2 planets are going to have 3 droids each, and it has a nice little radar image on here to help find it, so that would get 3. And this is the beginning of the game here. You'd get 3 on Coruscant. The next planet would get 2. So Kashyyyk. Where is Kashyyyk? Right here. Another planet would get 2. That's Rishi. 1 planet would get 1. That's Darthmere, which I think I almost have it covered up. It's right here. And then another planet would get 1, Rodea. And that's where the villain goes. Okay? So Asajj Ventress would start there. Now all these would be face up this card pile. And you notice I have 2 mission cards here. That's because these planets can get invaded by droids as well. So what planets would those be? Well, we're going to play if we were playing Padawan, we'd take the top 3 cards. I'd move the deck away. I'd put the orange one here and the white one here, and one would be face down where we didn't know what it is. So what would be the orange one? So this says Citadel Rescue. We got to do a combination of assault and and stealth cards. I'll explain that in a minute. And it says when completed, the current Jedi draws 1 squad card. So that actually gives you a benefit. Now, what are those 2 asterisks there? That means that if the mission is completed, the current Jedi that took the complete mission action would take 2 damage, which can be avoided with armor cards right here, which I'll explain more in a minute. So now we know that that's the orange. I'll just put it right here, even though it's a little bit off board here. The next one that we know is the white one would be at Mustafar over here. And this takes a combination of assault and transport cards. Only 6 that you need, but you'll take 2 damage, the Jedi that completes it. So when completed, the current Jedi moves up to 2 planets. So it allows you to move after you complete it. So that would be there. And then the third one, we don't know what it is. Now again, we're playing that would be the Padawan level. And now each player would pick a Jedi. Now, when I played it on camera and off camera, I played Anakin and Ahsoka, and I lost twice. That's because you'll see here, the Jedis that you pick have different abilities. So you can play Obi-Wan, and like in Pandemic, each character you pick will give you advantages. So when Julie and I played, she played Yoda, and Yoda allows you to move another Jedi up to 2 planets. I played Luminara Unduli. Draw 2 squad cards and either discard one of them or give it to another Jedi on your planet. So this allows you to draw extra cards. And so that's why we were able to defeat Asajj Ventress and Darth Maul pretty easily with these 2 cards. So sometimes who you pick can affect the game. But you can also play... So when I played Ahsoka and Anakin, you can see they're very combat-oriented. And that didn't help. That's a different strategy that I wasn't using. I think you got to play, depending on what Jedi powers you have, it's going to affect how you play the game. We haven't played Mace Windu yet, or Ayla Secura. So those are the Jedis you pick. So if we were playing Luminara and Yoda, we each take a reference card, we shuffle them up, and so if Luminara, that's me, I will start out on Kamino. So Kamino's all the way up here, and then Yoda would start here on Naboo. And then we keep the other side for reference purposes. So those are our Jedis. We don't need the other reference cards or the other Jedi cards. Now let's take, so the next step in setup, and really the root of the game, is getting squad cards. So each of us would start with, and by the way, this is used for solo play to keep track of what Jedi, so you don't get confused. And this counter right here is to remind if you have a villain, that if you check this exclamation mark here to make sure that when it's the villain's turn, if she's on a mission planet, you advance the threat. And that's how you lose in the game. If the threat marker gets to 6, to Darth Sidious here, after the 6, I think it's basically referencing Order 66 here, you lose the game. You don't lose the game if you run out of squad cards, unlike the player cards in Pandemic. If you run out of player cards in Pandemic, you lose the game. And unlike in Pandemic, if you run out of disease cubes, which are like the droids here, you don't lose. You just advance the threat marker. So if we can't place a droid, the threat marker goes up. And if we can't place another blockade, there's 3 of them, the threat marker goes up. And so why do you got to worry about blockades and where Ventress is? Because you can't complete missions if there's a blockade there, and or if there's a villain there. So you have to defeat them first. So back to the squad cards. So these are the 2 main types that you're going to use to complete missions and to defeat villains and remove blockades and remove droids. But you can't combine them unless you have someone like Anakin. So you either play assault cards, the red ones on an attack, or you play the stealth ones. But some missions allow you to use both. So in that case, you can use both types when completing a mission, because it's not an attack. It's only when you're doing an attack that you can't combine them. The armor is a way to remove, to prevent damage when you complete a mission. So like this one here would cause 2 damage. If I had 2 armor, I would be able to avoid that damage. However, if I don't, I must discard a card. And it's okay if you discard cards, because it's not like Pandemic. If you run out of squad cards, you shuffle the deck and you can get more. Another way you lose, take damage, is when you roll this die on attacks and when completing missions. When you get this is a success, the lightsaber symbol, and like for instance, this is 3 success, but you'll take 1 damage. So one little rule that could be overlooked is that if you try to complete a mission and you fail because you didn't roll well enough, let's say I rolled this and I didn't have enough cards to complete this target number of 6. I take the damage on the die, but I don't take the damage from completing the mission. So that's one thing people can forget. You only take the damage on the mission card if you complete it. And Jedis can help each other. So the last card type is transports. You can use them to move 2 planets instead of 1. And then, like in Pandemic, you have some special cards here, like you have the Bad Batch. And these are usually one use. You use them and they're discarded. Yeah, Padme, C-3PO. Now, what's interesting about this is you can use them to complete missions, but you use the Bad Batch and attacks. So there's some of those. So each character would get, each Jedi would get 3 cards. You'd shuffle this up. Let's say Yoda has this, and then I have this, and then now, and we didn't get any armor, if we end up being on the same planet, so let's say I end my move here, and the turn order is you ready cards. So this is like a deck builder. When you use cards on a turn, you get to ready them again and reuse them. You don't discard them like you do in a Pandemic. So if I was there and then Julie moves here on her turn, we can, and we were going to attack Asajj Ventress, Julie would roll the die. Go ahead and roll the die. So she got 2 successes. And to say she's doing assault right here. Asajj takes 3 damage. You can see that right there. So Asajj is removed. She's removed off the board. She's not defeated, because you can only defeat her when you complete the 3 missions. Now here's the thing. There's a droid there. If I don't help Yoda remove that droid, Yoda's going to take 1 damage. So I do have an assault card, so I can help remove that droid. Now the thing is, if let's say I wasn't there and Yoda did that attack, Yoda didn't roll well enough, she would take 1 damage from every enemy that's left. So whether that's a droid, a blockade ship, or a villain. So that's why it's helpful that's why you want to help each other. Now let's say she did have an armor, and she was the only one there, and she didn't roll well enough. She only rolled a 1. Well, she did roll a 2. She was able to get Ventress. Okay. But there's a droid left here, and she can use that armor to avoid that damage. So that's, so you ready your cards, you do 4 actions. So here are the 4 actions you can do. I showed you how to do an attack. And you can attack as many times as you want to, as long as you have cards that you haven't depleted. You can fly to a connected planet, and you can use the transports to do additional planet. Reinforce, you draw more squad cards. And attempt mission. Now notice that attempt mission is not the same thing as attack, because you can combine assault and stealth depending on the type of mission it is. But as I mentioned, you cannot complete a mission if the villain, so if we both move there, because orange is going to take 7, only the active Jedi will roll the die and deal with the damage. If I'm helping her, I won't take the damage. So if there's a blockade there, we got to remove the blockade first, and blockades take 2 damage. And if Asajj is there, we'd have to do 5 damage. We'd have to do an attack action to remove them. And on that attack action, if there's any droids left, you'd take damage. So more likely it would take 2 turns to do this turn, remove the enemies, and then we'd deplete our cards to do that, and the next turn we'd use our cards to hopefully complete the mission. But the thing is, let's say Julie used her cards to defeat the enemies, and I had cards left. I don't know if I would have enough to defeat the mission. So, because Yoda depleted all of his cards. So when the 3 missions are completed, you flip this over, and every villain has a setup for the finale. So this means now that we got to hunt Ventress down. She'll be at, which planet is that? It is Solist. And we got to have a combination, and probably going to have to help each other, because you can only have 7 cards in your hand. And once you get an 8th card, you must discard one. Or you play an action card, like the Padme card, for instance. So we'd have to do a combination of rolling the dice with assault and transport actions to defeat her. And if you do that, you win. Otherwise, we will lose if the threat gets to Darth Sidious. Again, threats will go up when you place a blockade. So just like in Pandemic, when you get a 4th droid on a planet, you place a blockade, the threat goes up. And you can have multiple blockades there if that planet comes up again. If you go to pick a droid and you can't place it, the threat goes up. And what was the other way? I have a little chart here. So this is the last thing here. This is on page 8 if you're following along. So 4th droid, if you can't place a 4th blockade, because there's only 3 in the game, and if you ever try to advance the invasion marker and it's already at the 4, you advance the threat. So if it's already at the 4 and you're going to need to advance it again, the threat goes up. Okay, so a lot going on, but that's a good thing, I think, for this game. All right, so let's take a look at our reviews. Again, this review is based on the fact that, if you turn your body a little bit, honey, we have the base Pandemic, the 10th anniversary. We have the expansions, which we haven't played them all. We do have this Hot Zone. We haven't played that one yet. We have played Pandemic Contagion, where you are the disease. I think that's out of print now. We have Pandemic Cthulhu right here. We haven't played the Fall of Rome yet. We've played Rapid Response, which is a real-time one. We played Pandemic Iberia and Pandemic Rising Tide, and then we also have the dice version of it. Okay, so obviously we're big Pandemic fans, so keep that in mind. And so Julia's played it twice. I've played it 4 times. And we even played the original Pandemic because we haven't played it since 2019.
Yeah.
So we wanted to play it again before we did this review. So let's take a look at what we got here. So Julia will go first.
Yep. Okay. I don't play a lot of Star Wars games, but when I do, I always have to be Yoda, and so I was really happy I got to play Yoda. I think this is a cool theme, if you, especially if you love Star Wars. If you're a big Star Wars fan, you're going to really like this game. I like Star Wars. I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan, but I do watch the movies with David. I don't always remember who is who and what comes first or anything like that, but I do watch it with him. I think the miniatures are really, really well made. Sorry, I had to get a little drink there. The only thing is, being more of a passive, I guess, player in this game, an alpha gamer will really take over, which means David had to, he pretty much said, okay, you should go here, you should go there.
Well, the first time.
The second time I did a little bit better on my own, but he still had to kind of, guide me on where to go. But it's, I liked it. Yeah. That's about all I have to say about it.
Okay, yeah. So you can have some alpha gamer issues. All right, so let's see what I have to say. So it's thematic fun with high replay. Because you have different villains and all these missions that you can do, there's a lot of game here, okay? That's all the missions, and the fact that each villain does play differently. Going against Count Dooku was a lot different than Asajj, because Count Dooku, you have General Grievous and Asajj on the board trying to chase you down. So that was kind of fun. And you got to defeat him 4 times, because just like in the movie, he'll run away, and then you got to defeat him again, run away. So that made it very
I thought
thematic.
that was kind of annoying.
Yeah, but it's like the movie. So it's an engaging deck building with missions and villains. The deck building is what really makes this exciting, because depending on the missions that you're doing, you're going to have to build stealth or assault, and then you're like, oh, we're facing a villain that's going to hit us a lot. We might need more armor, or we got to get around really fast. So that's really cool. And then because you can take turns to draw cards, take actions to draw cards, you can change your deck through the game, and it's not going to penalize you if you deplete the draw pile. You just reshuffle it. Unlike in Pandemic, once you go through all the player cards, you lose.
Yeah.
So it's a cooperative with less alpha. So I think this has less alpha issues than Pandemic, because Pandemic, especially if you're playing on the harder modes, you pretty much got to do certain actions, and if you don't, you will lose. This game, you have a little bit more flexibility, I think, on what you decide to do, because when the board starts filling up with droids, the tension is going to be, okay, do we avoid getting a blockade and increasing the threat by removing droids? Or do we go after the villain to keep the villain off the board? Because when the villain's off board, it can draw AI cards that won't help it. And then when it gets on the board, that's when it can do damage. So sometimes you're like, well, let's take the villain out so that way the AI cards doesn't help. So the tension is, do we complete missions, prevent a fourth droid and blockades, or do we remove the villain? So there's more options, I think, which leads to less alpha, because you have a little bit more flexibility. So quality art and miniatures. I mean, I didn't show all the miniatures here, but they did a good job, and they're detailed. They will hold paint very nicely, and even the droids have different poses.
Yeah, I noticed that.
There's ones that lean, that are standing up, and it's based on the movie. They just didn't do random. So I'm having a hard time showing it here. So that's a guy that's, pointing, leaning. I mean, it's just well done.
Kneeling.
Kneeling, yeah. Anyway, they didn't have to do that, and they're detailed enough that you won't mind painting those either. You could be a really good painter though.
Yeah.
Now there are some Jedi power issues. Some of the powers, they don't really make sense. Why does Luminar draw 2 cards? I don't know. It has anything to do with what's in the. I play a lot of Star Wars miniatures, the Wizards of the Coast version. Now it makes sense for Ahsoka and Anakin to do more attacks, but why does Ahsoka exhaust up to 2 cards for each one, deal 1 damage on your planet and a connected planet? Why is she able to attack planets that are adjacent? Why is Ayla Secura can move up to 2 planets? Now it makes sense that Mace Windu can move up to 3 droids to the planet that he's on from neighboring planets. So some of them was like, okay, they just kind of assigned it randomly, but it doesn't really fit the character. It's a minor thing. You got to be able to do something. So the last thing is the challenging rulebook to play correctly. Unlike the original Pandemic, which scored the highest out of the 8 rulebooks I analyzed for my dissertation, this would not score as high. There's rules that are buried in here. There is some doubt on, does the threat marker, when you place a second blockade on a planet, because you can have more than 1 blockade on a planet, does the threat marker go up? I think there's going to be discussion as to whether or not that happens. Because, in other words, once an occupation starts, you move the threat marker. If the occupation's already started and you place another blockade, you also move up the threat marker. I think there'll be some debate as to whether or not that happens. And it doesn't have enough rules examples. For instance, it really doesn't say explicitly that Jedis can help each other on attacks. You get it from the examples, but it doesn't say specifically that Jedis can move to the same planet or move to a planet with another Jedi, do an attack, and that they can help with cards. It's implied through the examples. So if somebody is not an experienced gamer, they're going to have a hard time with it. So that's why it's a minus. For me, I got through it. I think there was some doubt on the occupation part, which will probably be clarified in an FAQ, but you shouldn't need an FAQ to do that. All right, so now we're going to give our rating.
Okay. I'm sure mine's going to be a lot lower than his.
Based on the BGG scale. And again, keep in mind of all the pandemic games we have played. And I think it was good that we played the original.
Yeah.
So here we go. So Julie said
7. It's good. I'm usually willing to play. I don't know. There's always a lot going on, and I kind of just sit back and let David just kind of tell me what to do. So in a way, David's kind of playing a solo game, and I'm just there to keep him company.
No, the second time
do what he wants.
Second time you made decisions, and same with pandemic, you made decisions.
Yeah, but I get frustrated because I don't get the cards maybe I want, and I don't know. I had fun playing because I was playing with him, and if he wanted to play it, I would be happy to play it, but I wouldn't say, hey, let's play this.
Okay, well, how does that compare to regular pandemic? Because we looked it up. You rated that an 8.
I did, and I think that's because we were playing so much of it, but once we played it again last night, I would have dropped it down to a 7.
So both games are a 7 now. Okay, so that's why we played it again, because for me, pandemic, I rated an 8.5. Again, this is 3 years ago. I would rate it a 7 now. This one caused it to be lowered because of the deck building and because you have the villains and the mission cards. I put it as a 9. I would play this over the original pandemic. Doesn't mean I wouldn't play pandemic again.
Right.
Because I'm a big Star Wars fan, I'd choose this one. In addition, remember, I'm rating the original pandemic without the expansions. We haven't played with the expansions in even longer than 3 years.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you compare it to the other pandemics we have here, we prefer Pandemic Cthulhu or the original pandemic.
I don't even remember that game.
Yeah, so someday we'll do a video ranking all these, but right now Star Wars would be my go-to pandemic system game.
The only reason why I'd ever make it a 10 is that I got to play with Yoda. And I love Yoda. He's my guy.
Right. But you're rating the original and the this one a 7.
Yep.
Whereas me, this is a 9. It's very excellent. I don't know if it will ever go to a 10 because we haven't owned it that long. But I will choose this over any other of the pandemics, except maybe the dice one. You haven't played the dice one in a while. We do like the dice one a lot.
I don't remember that one.
That's okay. All right. Well, anyway, thanks for watching.
Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Okay. Bye-bye.